Hello, everyone. Welcome to another interesting and exciting episode of the Working in Tech live stream. Today, I have the pleasure to be joined by Tyrone Boyd, who is a senior cybersecurity analyst based in Florida. Graduated from South Florida in 2019 with a bachelor's degree in information and technology and security. And after working as a mail carrier with no tech experience, Tyrone has transitioned into cybersecurity in 2021 as an Associate Security Analyst. And in his current role, Tyrone has gained invaluable experience and insights that it believes can benefit others looking to break in the tech industry. With a passion for helping others, he's eager to share his journey and provide guidance to those in similar situations. As he firmly believes, there's a room for anyone willing to pursue a career in cybersecurity. I think that one piece sticks with me. And today, Tyrone will share his journey, his inspiring story of transition from a non-tech background into a thriving cybersecurity career. And I hope that this is going to be one of those engaging discussions filled with practical advice and insights that can help you start your career in cybersecurity. And once again, apologies for the technical difficulty. Just if you missed it at the top, this is Tyrone Boyd, who is a senior cybersecurity analyst based in Florida. Welcome to the live stream, Tyrone.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's jump right in, right? So one of the things that I see a lot of in the community is that not a lot of people are aware of the technologies that exist in the tech industry. Not a lot of people are gravitated towards that. So I'm always fascinated to ask what inspired you to want to work in the tech industry, want to work in cybersecurity, and things like that. Given that, of course, I imagine that your course in college probably played a role in that, or your degree, but were there other things that kind of like played into that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it pretty much started when I was a kid, just being into video games a lot. Like I guess my dream job was a video game designer. So that kind of like sparked like my initial introduction into like, I guess wanting to be more curious about technology. And then from there, just essentially went to like just, messing around on the computer, doing different things. And then, as I was graduating high school, uh, I think they gave us like a career aptitude test or something of the sort. And, computer engineering was something that I was interested in. And then, of course, they compare it with the salary and stuff like that. So you're just like, seems like a good job, seems like a good area, to go into. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much like how it kind of like, started over the years. And then, uh, I guess I can kind of go into how I ended up, going over to IT. Essentially, with computer engineering, there's a lot of, math behind it. And like, I was pretty good at math, but I didn't feel that I was that good at math to go through like calculus one, two, all those different levels of math. Um, so IT was pretty much more of like uh, more general, it gives you a more broad general scope of courses, and gives you like a little bit of insight into, different fields that you could go into.
So was it as you were doing this IT course that opened your mind to cybersecurity? Because I know that cybersecurity itself is fairly new. Um, how did you find your way to cybersecurity as your core focus or competence while learning IT?
So, I mean, basically, like, I think it was like an ethical hacking course, and like compared to like, I think it was just like a general networking course, like that seemed to have like the most interest because I think when when more people who might not be as familiar with cybersecurity think of hacking, they think of somebody in like the dark room with the hoodie on, just sitting at the computer. And I think that was definitely stood out as interesting compared to the other stuff that I was going through at the time. So that's definitely what piqued my interest as far as cybersecurity itself.
Great. So, um, what was your first job that was your tech job, and how did that help you transition into your cybersecurity role?
Yeah, so when I was pretty much from like my junior year at USF, I worked at Busch Gardens, which is like a theme park in Tampa. And then I also worked part-time at the post office, which was only like one, either Sundays or holidays. So then I was kind of doing that while I was going to school. And then, um, I was the first one in my family to actually like go to college and, graduate. So like, I think like having that, it kind of like, I didn't really have, I guess, all the knowledge that I could have used to kind of like navigate and know that, you got to get internships and this will help you later and stuff like that. So essentially, like, I was, walking across the stage with no internships, no like actual like experience. I wasn't that involved with like clubs and stuff. And, after I graduated, that's kind of how I transitioned to going full time at the post office. So I was, delivering mail in the hot Florida heat. And yeah, so that was like my first, like, I guess, you know, non tech career job, I would say. Um, but to kind of go back to your question, like working there, I think gave me, a lot of like work ethic just because it's very, like, it can be like physically demanding, it can be mentally stressful, and kind of things that I took away from it were there's like the customer service aspect, which translates to anything that you go into, like attention to detail. You don't want to deliver people's packages that to some house that's not theirs, and then they get mad. So there's different aspects in the job that I could take to the role that I am in now. Um, but yeah.
And that's I think you touched on something earlier that I thought is really interesting.
Mhm.
The role of mentorship in building successful careers. Um, y- how impactful would you do you think it was, or maybe lack thereof, the fact that you didn't really have anyone to point you in the right direction of maybe pursuing internships, or doing those other activities that could have put better positioned you to start your career a lot earlier, than having to take the detour first before actually kicking off.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say if you can, definitely find someone that has, is in the area that you want to go into and, ask them questions, get insight, just because, you know, you don't want to be in the position where you're graduating and then you see all your classmates like go off into, starting their jobs and you're just kind of like scratching your head, just like, uh, you know, the post office is cool, but it's not what I want to do. It's not what I went to school for 4 years for. So
Yeah,
definitely, aligning yourself with somebody and making sure that, you know, all your questions are being asked and, not being afraid to, I guess approach somebody just because it will speed up the process like dramatically.
yeah, that's great. So so even from your story, it appears that getting your first, cybersecurity job was a journey. Can you talk me through that journey?
Yeah, so I think it was like I think June of 2021. Uh, I was still at the post office and um, or I'll back up even further. So that previous fall, I ended up moving into this apartment with my friend, which had two other roommates, except we didn't know who they were. So when I moved into the apartment or whatever, the one of the roommates, who's my friend Jose now, he essentially works at where I work now at ReliQuest. So then we met, talked, kind of discussed like, oh, what are you majoring in? What are you majoring in? And I said I was majoring in IT. And he was like, oh, I work here. It's a cybersecurity company. And Um, Essentially, like time went on, working at the post office, like sometimes 12 to 13-hour days. Again, Florida heat, it's hot, you're sweating. And, uh, it came to a point in 2021, around like the end of June, start of July, where I was just like, uh, you know, I gotta kind of like make like a hard like pivot to just focus directly on getting into into tech, into cybersecurity in this instance. Because we had discussed that he seen how hard I was working, and then that kind of like sparked something where he was just like, if you just study this, this, and this, I'll be able to refer you, and then you'll be good because you have the degree, and then you work hard, you know. So I ended up just quitting the post office and, unemployed at that point. And essentially, like, I just had to kind of like spend every day just studying and, couldn't hang out with friends as much, couldn't play video games as much, and just kind of had to dedicate, all my time and energy towards studying to prepare for the interview to get into, where I am now. So that's kind of how that all went down.
So that's a very interesting point that you bring up, right? Because you do have a college degree in information technology, but that wasn't enough, right? And I think my question or comment will be, how important, whether you have a college degree or not, how important is the ability to learn, relearn, unlearn, just be a lifelong learner in building a great tech career in your journey so far.
I would say it's like a very core element to being in tech. I would assume that it applies to other areas as well. But for cybersecurity specifically, there's always, new trends, new attacks, stuff that you need to be aware of, just so that you're performing your job to the best of your ability. So, staying up to date with the latest, the news, latest like attack methods, stuff like that is very important. And it's not a field where you can just get into it and then just say like, "Well, I'm good now," because like you'll be like left behind, and then you'll pretty much your value that you bring will be like less and less over time.
Mm, okay. And I think something that you had mentioned also at the top is that you're more in an analyst role, but you're also working to kind of like transition into engineering. Two questions there. What's the difference, for people who don't know? And what's that journey looking like for you?
So essentially the difference is, in the analyst role, um, talking about this. So essentially, in my day, there will be certain, alerts that will fire in, customers' environments that'll set off an alarm. We go investigate, determine if this is an actual like, malicious incident, if it's something bad that's happening, and then or we determine if it's just something normal, and then from there we kind of just write our analysis of the situation, either escalate it to the customer, or close it out. So essentially it's more of like it's more of just like alerts will go off, you go investigate, determine good or bad, and then that's kind of where that lies. And then on the engineering side, it's more of um, I would say it's more of kind of making sure that the actual environment and everything within it is working how it should. So if you have a certain like technology, like if you have like Splunk, and then you're getting an error, that kind of affects the pipeline of how things are flowing, and then the analyst won't be able to get those alerts. So it's kind of more of like, I would say, making sure that everything's configured correctly, and then when things do break, because as we know, uh, everything in tech can break at some point. Just making sure that those things are up and running again.
Great, great. So if you would pick three skills that someone needs to succeed in a cyber in an analyst role in cybersecurity, what would those be?
Um, I would say kind of what we touched on earlier about being a good learner. That's definitely a big skill. And it's important to kind of note that you can learn from anybody. Like I still learn from people that just started, even though I'm in a senior role. You can learn from the new guy. You can learn from the person that's been there for years. So it's important to kind of understand and kind of, I guess, not have an ego about it, like to say that you know it's okay not to know everything and it's okay to learn from everybody. Um, Another key skill I would say is attention to detail, because the details matter when it comes to, you know, if there's like a security incident, you want to make sure that you have the facts and the details down correctly. You don't want to mix up like dates or times or, devices. So it's important to make sure that, your attention to detail is very good. And then I would say um, third would just be likely like being like a good teammate, just because the better teammate you are, the more people want to work with you, the better the overall I guess the overall team performs. So you don't want to be that one person that people don't want to interact with, because the more people want to work with you, then the better the overall thing, the overall job goes, and the more people learn from each other. So I would just say like be approachable, be a good teammate, and yeah.
Great. So what would you characterize or what makes a great teammate? Because I know, like, of course, I completely agree with that, right? But I imagine that it means different things to different people. But just in your opinion, like, what characteristics will someone have in their international in their interpersonal relationships with others that would make you think, ah, that's a good teammate?
I would say a big thing is just being reliable. Um, you want to know that the person that's working beside you, like, has your back and is going to be able to carry out, different tasks and actually carry them through completion. You don't want to, say you're going to do something and then it doesn't get done and then it kind of leaves everybody else in like a disarray. So it's kind of important to, be reliable and also be accountable if you do make mistakes, just because, um, you know, people, you're going to make mistakes. Like everybody makes mistakes. It's just about, learning from them and then making sure that you're not making the same mistakes over and over again. But again, just being accountable, and then other people can learn from those mistakes as well.
Yeah, that's a really great one. It actually reminds me of a story that I saw this week about someone who I think used to work at a big tech company, one of the fan companies, and then has basically been picking roles at startups and does nothing. And he's done this like four different times. Goes to goes to a new startup, really buddies up with the CEO, does about 4 hours of work every single week, and just does buddy buddy. And it takes them anywhere from like 4 to 8 months to figure out like he's not really doing anything. And by the time they start to kind of like question it, it goes on a sick leave or something like that, and then gets fired, and then just rinses and repeats.
Yeah.
So yeah. So yeah,
Don't
being
want to
a
be
being a
that
responsible teammate is definitely is definitely up there. Really good call. I think it's easy to take that for granted many times because oftentimes you'll hear communication, team building, this and that, but it's like just do your job.
guy.
Sometimes
Yeah.
like if you say you're gonna do it, just do it. Okay, great.
Hmm.
Um, so I imagine that your role from being a working at the post office and going into cybersecurity, you must have been had some like really nice salary bump. So
Yeah.
given that, okay, I'm sorry. I was gonna say,
Oh,
given that, what do you see typical for roles like yours when you're new and as a security analyst, when you're like mid-level, and what's the um, high level, just to give people a sense of what the earning potential is for these roles.
Yeah, so for me, essentially I went from, you know, essentially doubling what I made. So um, I think the most that I made at the post office was uh, I think around like 35 a year. And then once I you know, got through all the interviews, because usually with, these jobs, there's multiple rounds just to make sure that they're, correctly vetting people. I ended up starting at 70. So from there, it's just like, oh, like, interesting. Um, so, and I think that's essentially, I want to say, give or take, that's, I want to say that's essentially, where you would look to start off at. It just depends on like, obviously depends on the company, the area that you live in, just because, it might be different from Florida compared to California where the cost of living is higher. So they're going to start you off higher. Um, but yeah, so started off there. And then, from there, I would say, uh, like over like maybe like it took a little over a year. Uh, I got bumped up to like around 90, and then now it's just essentially just uh, it really just depends on, like I said, the company, and then the cost of living where you are. But from my experience, it's there's very little, like, I guess, resistance to how much that you can grow. It just really depends on the work that you put in. Uh, and just doing a good job, going the extra mile, and the money will follow. So
That's a really interesting way to put it. So I know like the debate has gone from maybe one end to the other. I remember a couple of years ago, like certifications were the be all end all. Now they're kind of like everybody's a little jaded with them.
mhm.
So from your perspective, is it a certification still great to get? And if they are, or maybe even if they aren't, what are some great ones, for a security analyst to have?
So I would say, so from my experience, when I was interviewing for the role, uh, I had my degree in IT, obviously, and then, uh, like I said, I was studying for, I would study for the Security Plus, but I didn't have a Security Plus when I started. I just studied the information just because it has, a lot of like the foundational like security principles within the actual exam itself. But I would say that one's definitely a big one to have, just because it's well recognized, from like public companies to, government agencies. So it definitely helps out there. And then I would also say, specifically for the analyst role, uh, you know, having it explained to me before I went through the whole like journey or whatever, it's kind of explained like there's like, SIM technology, and there's like EDRs. So there's like different technologies that kind of help you out on your day to day and that you use to, look over events and stuff. So out of those, I just kind of in my mind thought that I had to get some exposure to one of them. So that's when I got my Splunk Core Certified User Certificate, which Splunk is essentially like a data aggregation platform that can also be used as a SIM, security information and event management, I think. But essentially, like, I was able to get that entry level cert and kind of add that to my resume to kind of like boost it up a little bit to show that, like, although you're still gonna need training, like, this person at least knows this one tool, and that in my mind, that I think that helped.
Great. So can can you share, one, mistake, oversight, challenge potentially that you've had to overcome in your career, and something important that you learned from it?
Let's see. I would say, I guess coming from the financial aspect, you know, going from, you're making X amount of money and then all of a sudden it just doubles in your mind. You're just like, oh, I have double the money now. So I believe it's called lifestyle creep, where it's like you kind of your lifestyle matches your salary. So as soon as I got the job, I think it was like 4 months, and I was just like, I want to go live downtown. I want to live in a nice apartment. Went and ordered a car, and everybody's like, ordered a car. I'm just like, hey. So essentially, like, got a custom car, and then I was just like 2 months later, I was like, this was dumb. So then now, since then I've kind of like worked backwards and kind of like just chill. Like, you can't go spend as much money as you think you have. It's okay to save. But yeah, I would say that definitely making sure that you're saving, you're investing, and you're not just I'm in tech now, so I can spend as much money as I want. So just being mindful of finances and maybe getting more knowledge on it, just so you're better equipped to deal with it as well.
You know, I really really love that answer, because I think it connects very deeply to even like my reason for having these conversations. So I've kind of like broken my vision down into chunks of just smaller things I could do. So one of my biggest passion is basically see like this transformation, almost like a renaissance in the Black community. And I chose tech because ultimately one of the things that I saw is that the best way to, change people's circumstances is to change their economic circumstance, right? If we share more opportunities, share more knowledge, it's going to inspire more people to go get those skills. And just like you rightly said, like you're able to double that salary. But I think there's something that a lot of people don't pay attention to. And it was a great thing that you're able to catch that, and work on it, because you could actually be making 3, 4 times what you used to make, and your life financially could be worse off, where you're stressed out constantly. If you don't get your next paycheck, you're screwed, things like that. And you're
Hmm.
not broke anymore. It's just that, you're building a life that's not sustainable just because of this mindset, this abundance mindset. Of course, we will say have an abundance mindset, but there's you can have too much of an abundance mindset, to where
Yeah.
it's actually not creating abundance; it's creating a burden, right? Uh,
Hmm.
so I really, really like and enjoy that perspective, because ultimately, I think once we're able to build our wealth, it puts us in a position where we're even able to impact other people. But if you're constantly chasing, you don't even have time for yourself. You don't have time to do other things because you're constantly worrying and stressing out, when it should actually be a vehicle that frees you and helps you maybe impact and help other people. So
Yeah, definitely.
that's a really great point. Um, so for those who are starting out a new career in cybersecurity, or maybe reframe this way, of course, there's a saying that they say that, do what you know, but when you know better, do better, right? Um, you navigated this journey, this path on your own with the guidance from your friend, just doing what you knew at the time. But if you could go back, to Tyrone of, 4 or 5 years ago, and you were starting this journey all over again, what are some of the insights that you've gained now that you would navigate with, differently, whether it's entering faster or just entering better, or maybe even being able to command an even higher salary? Like what are some of those things that maybe somebody who's coming new now can take, maybe so they don't take that longer path? Or
Yeah. So I would definitely say, networking, uh, making sure that you're, being mindful and actually like, going out and pursuing, whether that's, at, security events or, different clubs if you're still in school, just because like, in a weird way, like it was kind of a networking event, like a networking, I guess, an instance of networking, but it happened based on essentially chance because, I didn't know that I was going to meet him. We just happened to, be within the same apartment and then kind of like clicked up from there. So I'll definitely say, networking, again, reaching out to people and, roles that you want to go into, having them give you like specialized, information that you can like digest and kind of like, you know, uh, kind of like guide your approach, I guess. Um, but in reaching out to people, I would say make sure that you're performing some of the work before you go and ask somebody. Just because people can tell if you're just asking them like, oh, like you know, for example, like what is like a domain controller or something like that, something that you can like easily just Google and the answer's right there. So I would say come with a more like crafted approach, just so that you're not uh, I guess taking advantage of a relationship potentially. Um, and then let's see, uh, I would definitely say, you know, create more projects. I felt like if I would have done that, I would have definitely sped things up. Just having like actual like practical things that you can speak to, um, and show potential employers that you're knowledgeable about. Um, and then just putting your name out there, whether that's like a blog, YouTube, something like that, just so that you're getting more visibility, and then, you know, kind of create like a following potentially, and then, that can also give you like another like talking point to like say like, I know I'm not, I haven't had any experience in the field, but, you know, point to your channel, like this kind of shows that I'm like curious about it. It's a deep interest of mine, and then, you know, more likely than not, when people see you're working, hard about something, they'll, you know, be more than willing to give you a chance.
I think everything that you said there is really spot on. But I think I really like that last piece because I don't think that a lot of people pay attention to it enough. One of the biggest challenges that I see is, and it makes sense, right? That if you're new to something, you because the other extreme of that is not great, right? If you're new to something, you don't want to share too much because you don't even know that you know enough to share. Because of course, like I said, the other extreme is that you've learned just this tiny little bit, and then you feel like a subject matter expert. But I think that there's a nice medium where, first of
Mhm.
all, you sharing is not egotistical or claiming to be an expert. In fact, you're sharing your journey, right? Like, oh wow, I didn't know this yesterday, but I know it now. Wow, I didn't
Mhm.
realize that this actually relates to this. And
Yeah.
there's so many magical things that can happen when you're doing that, because one, you've you've gone in that rabbit hole and learned this thing. Somebody who's an expert in this field can take interest and give you some other insight that wouldn't take you 4 hours to uncover.
Mhm.
Some person who needs someone at your skill level might find your post and say, wow, that's great. Well, come on to this program that we're doing. But if you didn't even share that, nobody would know that you were doing that. And then I think
Yep.
ultimately it's even good for your own personal growth because, um, I don't know how many people still use diaries anymore, but this could be like a journal of sorts where this is now, let's say, March 2024. You could go back to June 2023 and see, wow, imagine the things that I was excited about knowing then. I'm really thankful
Mhm.
for this growth. So there's so many benefits to be putting your work out there, to be putting your journey, your learning out there. And of course, like you rightly said, if you build a following out of it and this becomes a thing, great. But I think those are the three are probably even more important. So it's not, there's even no pressure to become a celebrity or a sensation, but it's just more for your own personal
Yeah.
growth and potentially finding opportunities. Because ultimately, even a recruiter trying to determine between you an entry level candidate and somebody else who's also entry level can say, well, I went to this person's LinkedIn and it was bare bones. But when I went to this other person's, wow, they were constantly
Mhm.
updating every single week. And because even the most senior roles, right, you're never going to know everything. If you already know everything there is to know about a role, you need the next role. So you're never
Yeah.
going to know everything about a role. So it's so important. What's more important than anything else is that you're willing to learn. And there's nothing that shows I'm willing to learn. Like I have 8 months worth of sharing my journey week to week of something new I learned or some project I built. So yeah, that's really powerful.
Hmm.
So what are some of the most exciting things to you in cybersecurity right now? I know like people are crazy about AI, but what are exciting to you? Could be a cross section or just purely cybersecurity.
Um, I would say the fact that there's always something new that's occurring, like it kind of like keeps you on your toes in a way to where it's like, you know, what was the, main attack uh being used like last month might not be the same for this month. So there's always like some degree of like changing, and there's always some degree of like um I guess I kind of think of it in like you're kind of going there, and if you come across like a certain like incident that's occurring, it's kind of like solving a puzzle in a way where like every like there's not going to be any you know one incident that's identical to another. So there's always going to be something new, something that you can look back on and learn, something that you can take from that and apply to something you come across in the future. So it's kind of like ever ever changing, and I would say I can appreciate that about cybersecurity, just because like in previous jobs, like after a while it's like this is the job, like there's no changing. It's like this is it. Like either deliver mail, or if you're at the theme park, one ride, you're just working that specific position. But with this, in addition to like the opportunities that you can get, just on the day to day, there's always something new that's coming up.
That's amazing. So your move up from being an associate security analyst to becoming a senior security analyst, what was that jump like, and what were some of the changes that you encountered in that growth?
So essentially, um, it was kind of like, in a way, you're kind of doing the same thing, but there's just, you know, as the role states, there's added, responsibility. Like, when you're first starting, you're not gonna, obviously, you're gonna be new. You're not gonna be training anybody. You're gonna be, getting trained. So there's that aspect of it to where you're kind of like expected to kind of like pour your knowledge into the new analysts that join the team, get them up to speed so that you're a stronger team. So I think there's that aspect, and then also just like I would say just like a comfortability aspect of it as well. Just you know, even now, like there's certain instances where I'm just like I have no idea what's going on, but uh, I think it's like that time period kind of gives you that a sense of confidence in a way to where it's like, all right, I know I don't know what's going on, but I know, you know, who I can reach out to, or how I can kind of like break it down to kind of like digest it better, to kind of like move past it. Whether, compared to like when you first start and you're like stuck, you're just stuck. So I think it's, the added responsibility, being more confident in your skills, and then just being able to uh, you know, interact with other people and be knowledgeable on certain things to, I guess, a greater depth.
That's amazing. If you're just joining us, this is Tyrone Boyd. He is a senior security analyst, and we've been chatting roughly about the last 40 minutes about his amazing journey into tech, the lessons, the blessings, and really excited to have you. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. I'm really excited to have you here. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. We're gonna start, taking those audience questions in a little bit. But something that you touched on that I think I really connect with or resonate with was, as very early on in my career, one of the things that I didn't really like was when people ask for many years of experience, right? You feel like, you're comfortable enough in your knowledge to be able to challenge for those roles. So why are you asking for this many years of experience? But I think as you become more senior yourself, you realize that there's just some things that take time. Even if you had all the knowledge, as a newbie, you're not gonna have the experience, right? You've not
Mhm.
dealt with challenging situations where you have to stand on your 10 toes and figure it out. And
Yeah.
it could even be for, maybe it not might not even be like being brave, but it might even be like, there's some situations that require you to be, aggressive. And I don't mean physically, I mean like, take aggressive action. And there's some
Yeah.
situations that require you to, watch it play out and make a decision. Experience teaches you which approach is better, overall,
Hmm.
because you've tried it so many times. And that's why, you will typically get more trust and more responsibility as you kind of like grow in your career, because you just encountered more challenges, and you figured
Yeah.
out, what are good and bad approaches to working them. So that's definitely a very important point that you bring. So let me ask this other question this way. So you have the privilege of having a college degree, but I see so many people who don't have that, who are transitioning into tech. What would you, how would you advise someone who doesn't even understand like some of those basic fundamental principles that you would learn in your information technology degree to to get up to speed, or to kind of like close that gap?
Um, so I would say, I guess this is where like certifications come into play, where it's like, uh, CompTIA has a range of, certs that, start from like, just learning about like actual computers, in the A plus, and then you have the network plus, which is more like on the network side, and then obviously the security plus is which is like securing the network. So I would say, if you're, freshly just starting out, I would kind of dive into some of that information, kind of familiarize yourself with it, and kind of use it more of like a guide. So if you're like going through like the cert material and you come across something that you don't quite understand, that's where you're gonna have to learn to lean on your, other resources, or just doing like your simple like Google searches. Now we have Chat GPT, so that's also, another resource that you can use. So it's just about like kind of like creating the plan and going through the plan, and when you kind of like bump your head, uh, going out, grabbing the information that you need, and then kind of like revisiting it, and then continuing, down that guided path to, learn that specific knowledge. Um, so yeah, I would definitely say like I would do certs, even courses, like we talked about earlier, Kenneth with ECA, you know, uh, I would say like having that like specialized knowledge, to kind of like having someone to, kind of be there to give you that like knowledge, like, oh, this is, what this is, instead of you like cutting down on that time to where you would go out and get it yourself, versus having someone kind of just there to be like, this is what it is very, cuts down on that time a lot and will speed things up.
Uh, that's a really interesting one. So we have our first audience question, and it says, "What does the average day look like for you as a security analyst?"
Yeah, so I would say the average day is just, you work a certain shift. Specifically where I work at ReliQuest, it's 24/7. So we have, different shifts spread out across essentially the globe at this point. And you come in, you start your shift, uh, and then you'll kind of work out of like a queue. So you know as alerts are firing, it'll be like this alert fired at 8:01, 8:02, 8:03, and as like a team, you'll go through, assign different alerts to yourself. First in, last out, I think. So whatever one fired the earliest, you're grabbing that one. So you're essentially doing that I would say, in this role for the majority of the time. And then there's also like different like ad hoc projects that you can do. But specifically for me, it's, going in, grabbing like a stack of alerts, working through them, seeing what's good, what's bad, which ones you need to spend more time on. Um, and then, can also play a part into it if, whether you're working for like a company that does their own security versus working for an MSSP where you're working with multiple different customers. So you might have, customer meetings from you know, like 10 to 11, and then, you're back going through the queue, working through the alerts. So it's a lot of, I would say a lot of like, because as you're going through the individual alerts, you're having to pull from different resources to kind of fully understand what's going on, so that you're making the best decision. So I would say it's just a lot of that, and then, from time to time there'll be other like special cases and projects that you might work on.
Great. And I think you describing that workday scenario kind of like brings a question to mind. So, what would you consider like a cybersecurity analyst worst nightmare?
Uh, I would say from just like a day to day, I would say, if there's like an insane amount of volume. So I can kind of compare this to the post office, to where it's like, during Christmas time where people are ordering as many packages as they want. Your day, like you get in, you're just like, I already know what today's going to be like. It's going to be a long day. That can also be applied into the analyst role, where you get in, you see the boards at like 100 plus alerts, and you're just like, yeah, it's gonna be one of those days. I would say either that, or if there's like an actual security incident, and uh, you know, at that point, then there's like real like consequences to, your response time, and that can like affect, financial, everything. So I would say from a day-to-day volume, and then just like in special cases, if there's like an actual like incident.
And that probably leads me to also the next one is that what are some of the, because we've been talking about all of the things that you should do to, to build a great career as as a security professional, but what are the things not to do if you're a security professional or aspiring security professional?
I would say kind of like what we touched on earlier. Just you can't assume that uh, that everything. You can't assume that just because there's two alerts that might look similar, that it's the same thing, and you don't have to spend as much time or energy towards actually figuring out like the cause of the issue, because that can lead to misses, and then obviously misses are just bad for everybody. So um, you want to, I guess, handle everything with some degree of care. Obviously, there's certain special cases where you'll come across where you're just like, yeah, I know what that is. I've seen that a certain amount of times, and like it has like certain like special, I guess, like artifacts that just let you know that this is like an ongoing issue that's going on, and you have the context to back that up. Uh, so yeah, I would assume that you know nothing, and actually like work through the issue at hand.
And I heard a story recently. I don't remember the details of it correctly, so I'm not going to kind of like butcher it. But I think the story was just kind of like around how a firm that was supposed to be a top cybersecurity company basically had, hackers basically sitting in their system for such a long time, right? Like they even became like a part of the network, and they were basically like just funneling data.
Hmm.
And um, I almost want to ask, what is the, as a security professional, what is the way to not get that complacent to where like, your whole system gets taken over that way? Like, I know you've touched on the fact that, of course, don't take things for granted. Don't say, "Oh, that looks like what I've seen before. I'm not gonna pay it attention." But are there other things that you can do to basically like stop those kind of threats?
Uh, yeah, I would just say, making sure that, you know, like in my case, at RQ as a uh, MSSP, it's kind of like the moment that you see something that might be like to the degree of like that level, you're gonna want to reach out to somebody. That way they can kind of like essentially just like cut off that piece of the network so that they're not able to, interact internally anymore or externally. Um, so it just really comes down to like being quick about it. Like you can't just say like, oh, this looks bad, and then just, I might go do something else, come back to it. Like you actually have to like kind of like be as quick as you can, gather up as much information uh, as you can, and then pass that on to someone who can either isolate a device if it's just a single device or isolate like a segment of the network. Um, so yeah, I would just say like the response time, and then also kind of knowing, uh, being more, I guess, knowledgeable about the environment itself, knowing what is normal and then what's not normal. So if you see like a computer reaching out to this weird address, that's probably not going to be normal, and you might want to isolate that so it stops and you can investigate further.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely imagine that, security roles are very challenging because I think the biggest problems that um I imagine with security just in general is that people often tend to, if you work a security job, right, like you have to be right 100% of the time, but the person who's no, you have to be right 100% of the time, but the person who's trying to like breach that security only has to be right once, and then they're in.
Hmm.
So definitely must be a really challenging role. We have another audience question, and the question is AI taking away jobs a real threat for the industry, or would there always be space for cybersecurity professionals? I think this is actually a really good question because um, I think for the longest time, most people have been very comfortable, like developers. But there was a new service that I think came out last week or 2 weeks ago that was basically writing code, debugging code.
Yeah, I think it was like
Um,
Devin something.
yeah, so it's like, is that a real fear in cybersecurity as well?
Um, I mean, I think there's, obviously with like AI becoming more, I guess, prominent, there's, obviously it's like a thought because, nobody wants to just, be in an industry and then all of a sudden there's no need for you and you're just kind of like, lost in the world. I would say as it stands now that there's still, a great degree of job security in that AI isn't necessarily going to, I guess, make, I guess, analysts obsolete, but more of act as like a tool for you. So, for example, if you're coming across like a certain like script, if it's like a weird PowerShell script that you have, and normally you'll have to, actually look at, I guess like the documentation, look at the command, see what it's actually doing. But with like, tools like, chat GPT or things of similar nature, you can just say like, what is this? Copy paste, throw that in there, and then it's like, oh, this does this, and then this does that, and that does that. So it's more of like a tool for you to kind of like reduce that response time rather than like an actual like, you know virtual analyst that's like going through and doing the investigations for you.
Yeah, I think I also have a similar view because I think cybersecurity is a bit more nuanced in the sense that um, even people have to, of course, I'm not saying that machines can't learn at that rate, but um, because the threats are real and dynamic and always changing, I think again, I'm not doubting that you can train a computer to be also that good, but I always think that it will be something that has a human element, and definitely maybe in the short term, not at the
Yeah.
greatest risk of being completely taking over. So Next question is, do I need to know how to code to work in cybersecurity?
So I know that some jobs will like want you to have some degree of like scripting knowledge, just because it helps you with like you know I guess like speeding up the process if there's like a certain task that you need to do, and you just have it in the script to where you just run the script and then it'll automatically do it. But for the most part, from my experience, where I'm at, there's no requirement to code. I know that that's like a big misconception, to where it's kind of like, I wanted to do this, but I don't really like coding. There's plenty of different roles that like don't touch code at all, that you could get into and still be in cybersecurity or tech in general. Uh, so I would say that it's not a requirement.
And I think kind of like the follow on to that is like, so aside from like the security analyst role, what are some of the roles that are also similar in the like of requiring people to know how to code?
I would say I know specifically for like more on like I guess the networking side, like if you were to like run like a specific like configuration script that kind of like, so like rather than like I have to go and run the script or run the same commands, X amount of times on X amount of devices. I can just have one script that's kind of like it's gonna do what I want it to do, and then I can just, um, essentially just like I said, like reduce the time, reduce the amount of work that I have to do because I already built up the script once, and then I can just use it whenever I want. So I'd say more on the networking side, and then obviously there's some cases in the in analyst roles that I've seen where like certain scripts will assist you, but I personally haven't had um, to have a script written up or anything like that to perform my day to day.
Great. I think we're actually at time now, so I would just leave. Typically, we do this at the end. I'll leave this for you to kind of like say any last words of advice or encouragement or shout outs, whatever it is.
Yeah, so yeah, I would definitely say if you're interested in the field, don't feel like, you know, I know it can be like daunting to be like kind of like down on yourself, like it's not, I'm sending out, applications and not getting responses. It's definitely worth it on, the other side of things once you're actually in. And then from there, it's just like, wherever you want to go, if you put in the work, you'll get there. So I would say just, keep at it. Reach out to people. You know, if you want to, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Message me if you have any questions. I'll be more than happy to, help you out, assist with anything that you, are confused about, or, any like career thing that you want to talk about. And yeah, just keep working, and I feel like it'll work out if, you're working towards something.
Yeah, well, that's a really great place to land it. Keep working and it will work out. Really want to appreciate you so much for coming on, Tyrone. This has been such a great pleasure to have you and to share your incredible journey. I'm sure like this has been very useful and insightful to the people who are watching. And I hope that, as always, this episode inspires someone to pursue their dreams aggressively and hopefully on the other side of that, they're able to reap the rewards. Again, thank you once more for coming on the show, and I think that's what we got for tonight.